So hello and welcome to the annual artist interview. Today, we're proudly going to hear from artists Martha Rosler and Wendy Redstar. It's very special to have them both here with us today. My name is Elise Longier, and I'm the chair for the Services to Artists Committee, who annually puts on this keynote event. I want to thank and acknowledge my committee for their hard work and dedication leading up to this year's conference. Amanda Lechner, Sybil Charlier, Matthew Conboy, Wanda Ramundi Orts, Gina Washington, Alex Bostick, and Julian Hallidan. Their effort and expertise have been essential in making this year's programming such a success. I also want to recognize the College Arts Association for seeing value and supporting artists. Specifically, a big thank you to Maymay Amagbai, Megan Donahue, and Mira Freelander, whose mentorship and ongoing support has been invaluable in bringing everything together. Lastly, this session is generously supported in part by the Joan Mitchell Foundation in conjunction with Joan Mitchell's centennial celebration. Please join me in welcoming their Executive Director, Krista Blatchford.
Welcome. It is wonderful to see you all here today. I am Krista Blatchford, the Executive Director of the Joan Mitchell Foundation. We are happy to be a supporter of this year's artist interview session here at CAA. In conjunction, as Elise mentioned, with the centennial celebration. Joan Mitchell's birthday was actually on Wednesday. You can find more information about our centennial activities on our website. At 100 years, Joan Mitchell's legacy encompasses her work as an extraordinary artist who broadened the scope of what abstract painting could be, and is also now layered with her generosity. Following support given to other artists during her lifetime, Mitchell's will directed that a foundation be created to aid and assist visual artists in their lives and their practices. As we say, we are an organization that's from an artist for artists. Aligned with this legacy and the importance that dialogue with other artists played in Mitchell's life and creative development, we at the Foundation see CAA's annual artist conversations as a generative opportunity to hear directly from two artists in conversations about their practice and process and lives. So this afternoon, we're honored to have Martha and Wendy, who is a JMF recipient, in each of their conversations. And I really want to thank CAA for letting us take a moment to welcome you all, and it's great to have you here. So thanks a lot. I'm going to hand it back to you, Elise, right?
So our first conversation is between artist Martha Rosler and Columbia University professor of art history and archaeology, Julia Bryan Wilson. Martha Rosler's work centers on the public sphere and everyday life, particularly with respect to women. Reoccurring themes include food in its many roles and guises, urbanism and spaces of transit, and war and national security. She has initiated a number of events in US and Europe that bridge the diverse publics, including garage sales, pop-up libraries, and a long-standing collaborative project that explores homelessness, housing, and the built environment. Through her varied artistic practice, writing, and activism, she challenges the mechanisms of power and their normalization within imagery, narrative, and discourse. She has received numerous honors, and rightly so, including the anonymous Was a Woman Award, the College Arts Association Distinguished Feminist Award, the Women's Caucus for Art Lifetime Achievement Award, the Oscar Kokoschka Prize, the Spectrum International Prize in Photography, the Guggenheim Museum Lifetime Achievement Award, the Asher B. Durand Award, the Litchwort Prize, and 4 honorary doctorates. Rosler lives in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, whose decades of gentrification have often figured in her work. On a personal note, I've been studying and writing about Rosler's collage practice for many, many years. She's been incredibly influential in my practice. It's such a privilege to have her here with us today. Please join me in warmly welcoming Martha Rosler and Julia Bryan Wilson.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to CAA and thank you to Martha for issuing this invitation. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be in dialogue with you, and I feel truly that on today, February 14th, 2025, your work has never been more relevant. And it's really important to hear from you and hear from the truth tellers about feminism and war and the perils of nationalism in a moment like this.
Thank you for not only accepting this mission, but for overcoming the fact that you have been injured. So thank you for taking time to do this.
Absolutely, wouldn't have missed it. I want to begin really at the very beginning with one of your very earliest bodies of work, made when you were 20, as far as I understand, that to me prefigures a lot of your later interests in the urban landscape, in questions of class, in the lives of everyday working people, and in the question of the moving body, because these are photographs taken from a moving car. And maybe let's just begin here and tell me about some of your influences. I'd like to hear about your darkroom process. There's already so much to unpack just from this very early series.
So I'm Brooklyn born and bred, and I'm from the Saturday Night Fever generation, I guess, which is our one aim was to get across the damn bridge into Manhattan. And we used to walk over the Brooklyn Bridge as often as we could from Crown Heights, and hung out from Delancey Street on down through Chinatown. And that's where I thought the world was occurring. So it was sometimes in a car, as it is in both these photos, but I was also interested in taking pictures of cars and of the ancient sites along the waterfront and on the street, of creating infrastructure. This sounds so dumb. And the tar carts that were fixing the streets, just kind of seeing the city as a sort of an organism where people lived and moved and sometimes just sat. But also, I was interested in photography because New York was a photographic city. That is, there were photos everywhere you looked. If you went to any of the small cafes in what became the East Village, or in the West Village, they were aligned with photographs. There was even an actual photographic gallery, I guess, Helen G. Because photography was obviously pictures of the people by the people. That is, photography was not a glorified art. It was the art of the everyday and the art about ordinary things. Now, the fact is that this one on the audience's right that you chose, actually, I hate to say it, is kind of a reference to Walker Evans' work that I'd seen. Of course, it's a cliche to quote Walker Evans. He wasn't my model by any means, but he was someone whose work affected me particularly, and Let Us Now Praise Famous Men. But this was about the question of where is it that we learn what life is about? Is it on the street or is it behind the shop window? And he does an interplay with that very often. He's very interested in the kind of, if we want to say, the vernacular way that people represent their line of work or themselves, but also the way that things just are not beautified. He was always, as an aristocrat himself, so to speak, and an aesthete, he was interested in the aesthetics of vernacular production, but never in order to either judge it or glorify it, but rather to take a close look at it. Now, the interesting thing to me about, and so without knowing who I was influenced by, I should say, of course, the Film and Photo League photographers of the everyday, though I would say that even at that point, my politics was more to the left than a number of them had eventually moved. And so we're talking about these, what's the date?
64.
Yeah,
And
right.
I also see Helen Levitt. I
Yeah.
see Robert Frank.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But I don't know that I would ever take a picture like that one anymore, because I don't really take pictures of people who I don't know where they become objects for projection. So I was a student at Brooklyn College, and the dark rooms that I utilized were those of, what's his name? I was going to say, I can't believe this, Robinson. Any photo person knows who I'm talking about. The guru of documentary in New York City, Rosenblum. Yes? Geez, no photo people here. Okay, so Walter Rosenblum was the guru of, old-fashioned word. So do I not need this one? How are we doing? I'm talking to the hidden mic. So he ran the darkroom at Brooklyn College. I don't know that anyone thought that photography was a big deal. I was a painter myself, but I was making photographs and working in the darkroom, his darkroom, and I had arguments. His students were all male. I had arguments with them about what documentary was. And it set me on a path of trying to determine what I thought documentary was. Because, of course, John Sharkovsky at MoMA had made it his thing, and it was really an important thing to think about, particularly in a war period. That sounds a little airy-fairy, but I think you might know what I mean, but we could move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just important to lay the groundwork for the fact that you had a certain origin moment in straight documentary, black and white
Absolutely.
photography that has to do with a certain tradition of the street.
Yes.
And from there, you go to San Diego.
No, this is New York.
Oh, still in New
Yeah.
York. Okay, I stand corrected. From there, you start manipulating found images, and of course, in the long legacy of collage and photo montage as a kind of weapon to intervene in known languages. And I look at a work like this, and I think of someone like Hannah Hoch, I think of John Hartfield, and I'd like to hear you talk about how straight photography becomes, a process of cutting and collage.
Well, once you start looking at a photograph and trying to decide how it makes meaning and what is the meaning that it makes, it's impossible not to think about representation in all forms. And of course, photography was everywhere all the time. My family didn't have a lot of books, but they sure subscribed to Life magazine. There were various epiphanies I had about the meaning of an image. And, there's an embarrassing one because it's a race story. My mother, who was a New York City school teacher, employed an African-American woman to come and do the ironing and vacuuming. We lived in a 2-bedroom tiny apartment, but she had this woman come in once a week, and I was friends with her, of course, as children are, Elizabeth Peoples. And I was looking at Life magazine, I was maybe 7, and it was a picture of members of a tribe in Africa. And she pointed at a guy and said, "Oh, what a handsome man." And all the categories in my head blew up. And I thought, it's a man. He's handsome. In other words, she helped me confront for the first time the bridge of otherness, of looking at who are we looking at? Are we looking at us or at them? Another moment with Life magazine, I looked at a picture of a room much like this, and I saw that the people on each end, their heads were distorted like melons. And of course, because it was a wide angle lens. And I'm looking at this. Now, remember, I drew and I painted, so this idea of how you get something down, a mark, was very important to me. How could their heads look like that? The people whose heads are in the middle don't look like it. This is very primitive, but it was the beginning of my trying to understand how the marks we make through a photographic indexical image, if you will, actually what it is they say to us and how we understand the meaning and how we naturalize that meaning, because photography represents itself as the real. So I happened to attend a lecture by some women, I think from, I don't know, maybe the National Organization of Women, and they were talking about the representation of women in photography, in ads. And another little recognition occurred to me, and I thought, that's right. In the New York Times Magazine, we have serious articles on the right, and on the left, we have pages and pages of women in baby doll outfits and in provocative underwear, and nobody ever talks about this. But in effect, these women were talking about it, and so I thought, well, let me think about this. Of course, this one is a Magritte, obviously.
Well, this one I chose, well, in part, I wanted to ask you to comment on how this series is not only about gender, a word we can no longer use, but obviously in some ways, and beauty standards, et cetera, but it is also a series about race, in that it is a series about whiteness, and it's a series about the norms of commercial advertising and porn you chose porn magazines, and how the drive towards how the racialization works in a really specific way here. Mm-hmm. I also think this is a really funny image, and that a lot of your work has a humor that is extremely cutting and quite subversive. I mean, this has an almost surrealist flair with this, smiling. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of key terms in this comment, but anything you could say that has to do with whiteness or the humor that often comes up in your work would be, I think, really welcome.
Well, I think in terms of whiteness, what's apparent is that there was only one category of other that was permitted to be in these advertisements, and that is woman. Mm-hmm. And woman had to be not only a starved woman in some way, but a superwoman at the same time. In other words, she is the unattainable, attainable goal, who is both presenting herself and rejecting the viewer. And also, I spent a lot of time thinking about the way that the female body, and so I'm deviating from what you're asking, but I will say there was never a woman of color that was in these roles at this time, and it took a long time. And then, of course, the women of color were Black and generally not from the US. They represented a super other, mm-hmm. and another form of exoticism. So women are both passive objects, always say, household appliances, and also suggesting that they reject you, the viewer. So there's that push-pull. But I was very concerned about, and in fact wound up giving a lecture for years on the body in pieces, on the way that the female body is fragmented in advertising in ways that the male body never has been. And this, of course, again, has to do with incapacity, inability, passivity, availability, and just plain inhumanness. That a woman is always a doll, whether she's a Helmut Newton doll or whoever else is the doll guy. Can't even say his name.
Hans Bellmer.
Yeah, Bellmer. Yes. Which was taken by a number of English photographers. So, you know, the war on women, do I have to mention it? So here we are again in a Christo-fascist moment where the only women who are real women are women who are women with uteruses, who are willing to stop everything that they had been thinking about, which, when Butkus said this, the nuns did not like it very much, and just procreate and, you know, do what her husband wants. I mean, it's overt. We are back with full-bore patriarchy, which, of course, takes its place as being a fascist move. And I guess we haven't had a fascist female in power in any country yet that I'm aware of.
Maloney in Italy.
Oh, yeah, is she really in power? I guess sure, the
Le Pen in France.
What?
Marie Le Pen also.
Oh, well, she's hoping.
Yeah, she's hoping.
Yeah. Marine, I guess she wants to be seen as masculinized. I'm not sure that the Mellons does.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. But Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, Thatcher.
Is, you know, the Iron Lady. But, you know, there's where the fantasy of the mother is most obviously played out. Let's get off this subject before I have a heart.
No worries. I mean, I think we will come back to the question of humor, or the many tones and the moods that you often marshal
But
in
also,
a strategic way, but also.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't want to. You know, this is the same time. This is 65. The photos you showed were 64.
Yes.
I'm doing everything all at once.
Doing everything
I have
all at once.
No sense.
Yeah.
I was painting large, abstract paintings. I wasn't studying painting, but I took painting and I studied painting, if you can believe this, at the Brooklyn Museum, which had an art school. So.
I 100% believe it, and in fact, these are perfect slides to show a kind of painterly sense that you often bring to your montages. That is to say, a really keen sense of color, scale, composition. I think that you're often utilizing collage in a way that's so sophisticated and has so much to do with how form creates meaning. So, Bringing the War Home, I would venture to say one of your most canonical bodies of work, taught in every histories of photography class that is worth its salt. Medical surveillance, a little bit less well-known, a little bit more of an obscure montage, but just to show the range of how you're working with found imagery at this moment. I've always found this particular piece from Bringing the War Home, called Red Stripe Kitchen, so chilling, in part because of what I think of as your real skill in matching scales. So these soldiers who are looking through, I'm assuming, some kind of village in Vietnam, but you've superimposed them into this, you know, modernist kitchen, but they are at the perfect size. They really look like they could be in that space. And in others of this series, there's more of a mismatch of scale sometimes, but this one is so seamless. It's so, there's something so masterful about the way you've juxtaposed these things. And it truly is it really does the work that you want it to do of making us think about the ostensible separation of these spaces and what happens when we understand that actually, no, they are collapsed and we are complicit and are, we, that is to say, like someone in the US.
Yeah, so first of all, these were never meant as artworks. They were meant to be and were Xeroxed. My father, personal injury lawyer, introduced me to the Xerox machine in the store on the corner. I couldn't afford color Xeroxing, of course. They were $1 a piece. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make these things and hand them out on demonstrations, because whenever you went on a demonstration, some fool would hand you something that was like a crazy person had written it. It had no margins. It was a text and like it was translated from Albanian or something. And I'm pretty left, but I know when you're not actually, communicating with somebody, when you are ranting at them. And I thought, if you want to stop a war and you're trying to talk with people on the street about it, or just give them an image that reminds them that it's not over there, it's here, because we are creating this situation. And some of them are a little more outside. I got criticized by a cultural studies person that it's always someone looking out a window at it happening over there, but as you can see, that's far from true. My aim, I did a number of different works, including the clothing of, cast-off clothing of American women, hung behind barbed wire with the name and serial number of South Vietnamese women prisoners stenciled on them. My aim was always to say, there is no them, there's only us. And I mean this as deeply as I can. Our home situation depends on our adventures abroad, and we can't, I think maybe everyone knows this now, but at the time this was not, I was a kid anyway, We were not really supposed to talk about these things. It was the Cold War, the enemies and the domino theory and so on. You know about this. I will say that about this one, first of all, they are placing bazookas. But a French professor told me that a boy in her class wanted to know why the soldier was carrying a baguette. So,
this brings up an important point, the fact that these were Xeroxes meant to be handed out at protests. Then, as far as I understand, they appeared in alternative publications. Yeah. So the idea that you've been interested for a long time in different modes of distribution. Yeah, so distribution that goes outside of the normal market circuits of the art world.
Right. Like postcards.
Like postcards, which...
But without images.
Or postcards with images, or postcards with images. So I wanted to show a postcard, or a holiday card actually, based on arguably one of your other most canonical pieces of work, which is the video Semiotics of the Kitchen, that was first a live performance.
No.
You told me that it was.
Vital Statistics.
Vital Statistics was first. Okay. Again, I stand corrected. I knew I was going to be corrected a lot because Martha's No, in a good way. We should always aim to be very precise and specific. So Semiotics of the Kitchen, I don't want to run through what it is because I'm sure most people in the audience are familiar with it. But just to say that this was filmed, as I understand it, in Ida Appleberg's kitchen.
Yes. Loft. No
Loft.
Kitchen. There was no
right,
kitchen.
because you wanted a certain setup.
Yeah.
So I love thinking of the two of you doing that. And Barry Rosen apparently was on hand.
And Sakula.
That's right. So how
do you know this?
Because I just met with Barry. and I saw all of his seashells. Anyway, so here we are. There's a lot of questions to be asked about semiotics of the kitchen, not only about, which brings us back, I think, to the question of the deadpan or the humorous, because there is a humorous component, along with this very lacerating critique of the female body as a signifying system that is interpolated into the domestic. And then, I mean, there's also the question of the iterability of your work, in that here it is a video, and then it becomes a greeting card where, again, alternative systems of circulation. So let's stick with semiotics, and then we'll talk about vital statistics. So maybe you can say a little bit about your relationship to cooking, because that's what this, I mean, there's so many questions to ask.
Well, what interested me most, I've done a lot of work about food and cooking. This was a moment when, just as the current one, there was a wave of drastic fetishization, particularly for the middle class, of cooking as the only art worth actually getting close to, if you will. And what I think is funny about it is that it collapses Kant's categories. Not that I'm a Kantian, but he differentiates the aesthetic from the appetitive, because the aesthetic does not make you wish to reach out and grab it, but the appetitive, which is a lower category, does exactly. But food, you know, pictures of food, you look at it, you want to eat it. But anyway, the American public was being sold all kinds of stuff about cooking in the Time Life Cooking of the World series, because color printing had undergone a revolution, and now things could be beautifully printed in color without looking lurid, but rather realistic. And also, of course, every young woman was supposed to develop this various skills of maintenance. I won't talk about reproduction, which is nodded at by pornography, but of course, in many ways not. But maintenance involves feeding the husband and the family, kids, and being sure that it was something that you could really, really please the family with. And of course, Julia Child was not by any means the first TV chef, but she was the one who appealed to the middle class, and she was totally lovable in being this kind of party girl turned self-conscious French chef performing in a suburban kitchen. But I was fascinated with this idea of people sitting and watching somebody kind of slightly stumble around the kitchen and talk like this, and it was so charming. She was totally lovable, but also weird, especially for someone from Brooklyn. This was a very weird representation of a kitchen. Look at all those cabinets. So this is how I wound up with a loft kitchen with ancient appliances. By the way, my own stove at home is probably from 1925.
But there's a lot of anger in semiotics.
Well, yeah, but when...
And humor at the same time.
But especially in Spain, I have to remind the people that it's funny. So when I used to show it in classes, because I did a lot of traveling, visiting, because, you know, that's what you do, itinerant artist, I would sit in the back of the room and giggle so that the students or the audience would know you can laugh. Seriously, because they're like, especially the males. So I feel that women understood this from the beginning. There was just no question that people got it. This is not a Christmas card. I'm talking about the video.
Of course,
right.
Yeah.
The Christmas card is another vernacular thing. They used to, Photomat used to have these booths that you would drive up to. This is suburbia. And you'd pick out a blank and give them your image, and they would make a card, but they didn't want to do this because it was black and white, and they thought it was an insult to them that I was asking them to print the black and white image. And it was wrinkled anyway, that image. It's not perfect. But
But another way to penetrate the domestic sphere, in a way, is to send people cards.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Yes. You know, I've been thinking, do I dare get up? So, of course, this is not about semiotics. I went for the hand tools of the kitchen in order to be able to say this is an extension of the person of the woman, rather than, you know, the Cuisinart or the blender or the egg beater is okay. Well, because it's not electrified, but, you know, the rolling pin, the pan, it's like, you know, that array of things we inherited, because the surrealist in me is very interested in calling upon the just past and the obsolete, because those things figure in our dreams in a way that, you know, you probably are more likely to dream about hitting someone with a frying pan than with a blender. So
I'm going to muse on that one. So let's talk about vital statistics. So the Citizen simply obtained, the full title of which includes an opera in 3 acts.
Right.
Which started as a live performance.
Yes.
And is another chilling examination of the gendered implications of surveillance, of the disciplining of the female body. From what I understand, these almost absurd measurements that go on for some 20 minutes are actually based on garment measurements. So maybe let's tell us about that.
Well, this is where race is implicated absolutely centrally. In the library at UC San Diego, where I was a graduate student, I discovered there were pamphlets on pattern measurement and development where armies of women in white outfits, this is eugenics, totally, would go and measure people on bizarre parts of the body and for bizarre things, but all, you know, whatever, they draw little marks on a woman and so on. And there was a section at the back that said what happens if a Negro winds up in your group. Take the measurements, but discard them. So it was very straightforward that this pattern design measurement was really an anthropometric exercise. And I couldn't get over this. And it included for little children as well. And this idea of, you know, the idea of the standard that you had to conform to was externalized in terms of a pattern, but it was all of a piece with the ideology of creating a very detailed database on white people. And there is a section, one of the acts is about the immigration laws of the 20s and the way that IQ was, and Stanford Binet were used in order to say that only white people from Northern Europe are worthy of being taken in to immigrate. And so here we are.
And you begin this with your voiceover, you say this is about coercion, and you say there's like sudden and brutal coercion, and then there's like ordinary, everyday coercion. And I thought that really struck me in rewatching this in preparation for this conversation, this idea of coercion as a system of control that becomes so naturalized.
I think Foucault called it governmentality, but I never heard of Foucault at this point. I mean, it was from 73. I said, oh, what an interesting concept. But actually, Lefebvre had talked about everyday life, and the fact that certainly Protestantism demands that we internalize the rules of governance. And I thought, yeah, no kidding. And it ain't just Protestants.
That's right. I want to also talk about some of the projects that you've done that you call group work that fall a little outside of the normal purview of, a video that might be seen on a monitor. I mean, all of your work, I think, is really interested in contesting the normal market logics of the art world, but works like these, the garage sale, a collaborative piece about homelessness, if you lived here, ... really challenge the institution. And I think you've especially, I think the garage sale in particular is a bit rogue, or feels a little bit feral, or it is an odd piece. So here we are. It's first held in 1973 when you were at UC San Diego. You've talked a little bit about being interested in the voyeurism of the garage sale, which I think is totally true as someone who loves to go to garage sales, like the sense that you're picking over someone's refuse, and you're getting a glimpse, like this person likes that, or oh my gosh, this, kind of piecing together a story of the character of the person holding the sale. But can we just dive into the garage sale as a tool for you of critique?
Well, it was held in an art gallery, but not an art gallery. It was the student art gallery, even though there was an art gallery at UC San Diego. I apologize. And it was primarily about value and how we apportion value to things in the art world as opposed to things in everyday life, and in relationship to women, because women are the primary garage sale operators, and they're working in that liminal space between the home and the public. And the systems of value in a garage sale are radically different from those in the art world. It was advertised in the local penny saver, which is the free giveaway, as a garage sale. It didn't say art gallery, artwork. It had nothing to do with art. It simply was advertised as a garage sale. And of course, the people on campus also knew about it because it was in the central quad at the undergraduate library. And it brought together publics who didn't necessarily interact with each other. And I seeded it with letters that I had written and that I'd received, and family photos, but also a slideshow I had bought at a garage sale from a dead guy, the family of a dead guy. So, and they were all, color had gone crazy, so they were all red, and it was playing. And also there was a tape playing, which not only was a section quoting Marx on commodities, but things like, why not give it all away, which I saw somebody online is using that, why not give it all away? And I thought, yeah, why not give it all away? But, which I understood that nobody would listen to the tape. It was playing continuously. You couldn't get away from it. And then there was a big blackboard that said, maybe the garage sale is a metaphor for the mind. And there were nice things at the front, and then the further toward the back you got, the lighting was dim, and then there was pornography, really not, it was Playboy. And then there were empty welfare cartons because I was on welfare. There were no food stamps in San Diego. You had to go stand online somewhere and get a box of mystery meat or butter or cheese and be sneered at by the people who gave out the food. So they're like dried milk and so on. But there were also toys and clothing and records and stuff. There was the usual, but the clothing was of all different sizes. The shoes were all different sizes. So on the one hand, you have this picture of a self, and very few people notice, but wait, there's an extra large and there's a small. You can't have fit in both of them. But I had written these postcard novels that were first person singular as well, about women at various positions in relationship to the production of food, the third one of which was in Spanish, which was translated with a group of my friends who were actually Spanish speakers or literally Mexicans. It was San Diego, that is not Mexican Americans. And then if you want, and it was based on, it was documentary really, it was based on interviews with the women who worked in the homes of my professors. And on reportage in the LA Times as well. If you wanted a translation into English, you had to send me $1.50, and I would send you the text in English. And these were just postcards. They had no pictures. Anyway, so I wandered away from the garage sale. I will say something about the garage sale itself. I had a retrospective in 5 or 6 countries, and including New York, 1998 to 2000, and I was surprised that the curators asked about the garage sale because, of course, no art place would ever want to touch it, right? Well, what had happened was in those years, shopping became a central concern of the art world. And I was in a number of shows called Shopping, literally. And so they wanted to put it in the museum. And I thought, are you crazy? Oh, I get it, shopping, because art is a commodity. So anyway, obviously, this whole, the collapse of the idea of the commodification of people, of things, and so on, has fully taken place. And I now have to fend off places like Nuit Blanche in Paris that would want me to do garage sale. Get away, because what's the point of doing a garage sale for a museum that loves you? At least at MoMA, the younger staff loved it, but the older staff hated it, hated it. And in fact, the curator told me recently, there was a whole wall of underwear. I mean, a large wall, much taller than these walls, that the art handlers were very upset because they said, we didn't come to work in a museum to staple bras on the wall. Anyway, there's always a mixed public in the garage sale. So all the museums that asked me to do it wanted me to treat it as a charity event. And I said, I'll never do that. So all the money for each garage sale always has gone to charity. I never kept any of the money, including back when I was a student making nothing. So the one at MoMA happened during Hurricane Sandy, and so the director and the curator wanted me, to invite Paul Chan to come and run it since he knew how to deal with a catastrophe. And I said, sorry, Paul's a friend, but this is mine. And the other thing is they wanted me to name all the places, the charities. And I said, this is not a charity event. It's an event about desire. Mm-hmm. And I will not hold the sale. And this was like the week before. I said, and we'd prepared for a year and a half. I will not do this unless you do it on my terms. But then I came up with a solution, which is so ridiculous. On our big blackboard, it said 1 hour of proceeds every day will be donated to charity, when in fact, every penny that was taken in was donated to charity. So people are crazy. They just have this idea that if only they can make themselves seem noble and honorable, that they can somehow excuse the fact that they're having a garage sale in the museum. And also, I wouldn't let them describe it as an art project. So people came in from the street going, who's running this? I want to complain. So anyway,
Well, let's talk about,
Yes.
I also, I think we're kind of
Running
we
out of
may-
time.
Okay, we're okay. But we have a couple more slides to
Sorry.
look at. But I want to talk about your, I guess, the tension often with you in, with the word art. The tension or your ambivalence about the word art.
oh,
Yes. And how often, though you utilize the apparatus of the art institution
oh, your quote.
to do other things,
The quote that I thought you were going to put that up on the wall.
I will put it up,
Oh,
but
I'm
I first
sorry.
want to talk about that one. That's next, actually. But first, I feel that you did this almost, you infiltrate an art institution and you use its resources in order to make work about about other things, including if you lived here, where it's really a community activist project, or it's a project that is where you function almost as a catalyst for bringing together a lot of different publics. So maybe we can talk about how art is useful to you, even as you often refuse it, or you contest it, or you want to, you do battle with it. It is still strategic for you often to use its systems.
I am an inveterate art lover. I love art. I love looking at art. I love thinking about art. But I think the social category of production, reception, and dissemination is deeply troubling, and also at this moment, like everything else, captured by billionaires with nefarious intent, including hiding all their heavily valued art in lockers at airports, the art ports, which I gave a graduation speech at RISD, and all the parents perked up when I explained the art port, that there are these lockers and that maybe their kids could get some work in there. Anyway, I don't know if that's what they were thinking. Finally, a goal, money. So this was Dia of all places, the temple of high modernism, the white cube par excellence, let us stroke all these, mostly men, all men except for
Back then, all men.
Marion Zazula was, and also overtones of mysticism, because the people who ran it were Sufis, which was interesting, and they had a lovely poetry. They did not want to do this show. They didn't share their mailing list with me. They were like this the whole time until the openings, because they were afraid of what they'd see. But I won't drag you through how it wound up being 3 shows, but it was 3 shows. They were interested in the fact that, again, this is the problem of, us and them. I said, look, we are in a homelessness crisis. There are homeless people lying on the streets everywhere. You can't step outside without confronting people lying in boxes, because, the neoliberalism basically reinvented homelessness for the 20th century. So I would like to do a work about homelessness. And then I realized you can't, oh, yeah, right, that's great. But you can't do a work about homelessness. Homelessness is not a thing. It's a condition in which people wind up unhoused, not because there's a race of people called the homeless. This is about people who have been evicted or cast out on the street, whatever, it's obvious. So I thought I have to have 3 shows. Home front, people fighting to keep their homes. The middle front, homeless. And the last one, City Visions and Revisions, which is about architecture and utopian revisions. And there was a reading room, which nobody ever had in an art gallery at that time, a whole space devoted to books and pamphlets of things happening right away. And I put maybe 1 piece in any of these shows, but I was the curator. And I solicited work from all kinds of people, and that is all different communities by all kinds of people, doesn't mean anything. People who were in photography, activists, we went to activists. I met a guy when I was teaching in the Whitney program who was working on maps of New York and questions of housing, and I just said, hey, Dan, you want to work with me? So Dan Wiley, who is now, I guess, Chief of Staff of Nydia Velasquez, who is also my local assemblywoman. So he worked with me. And it turned out that his father was George Wiley, who was one of the founders of the Poor People's Campaign, which I didn't know at the time. I mean, I remembered George Wiley when he drowned. So he had a lot of contacts who were activists in various places around the city and beyond. And then I did something else that was not popular. I had 30 video and film presentations, which made Dia very cranky. They had a photographer come and take pictures, and he carefully removed all the TVs. And I said, what are you doing? He said, but they're too ugly. So the images have no TVs in them. So, you know, everybody does what they do. But my aim was to open the doors.
Yes.
And we had someone chalking on the sidewalk. I wanted to put a billboard outside. What wound up had to be inside. We had I worked with a group that had done a vigil in front of City Hall, Manhattan, for over 100 days under the auspices of the Interfaith Alliance. And I asked them if they wanted to participate, which was, as my friend Andrew Cristrucci at Bullet Space says, a lot of people had homeless people in their shows in those days. Yeah, because, yeah. Yeah. Christoph Adichko worked with homeless people.
Sure.
Yeah. Piece was, anyway, the point is they wanted to have an office in the gallery. Okay, have an office. They also held workshops, and we had panels, and they were filmmakers and activists and so on. We went to the activist groups and said, we would like you to put some work in our show, but we're not artists. That's okay, we'll help you. What would you like to do? So we just brought in a whole range of material, and people volunteered to do this and that, like a choir from Emmaus House in Harlem wanted to sing at an opening. What they wouldn't let us do was so we had a shelter set up, and of course, Homeward Bound wanted to utilize it, but we were forbidden. And we also couldn't make soup at the opening, which was someone else's idea anyway, but what's wrong with it? So there was, I tried to cross all the boundaries, but not in intention to make fun of Dia in any way. I mean, I may be talking badness about Dia right now at the time, but that wasn't the issue. It was that I was glad that they were willing to do this. And although we wrestled over what was acceptable, I still feel grateful that they allowed it, that they invited me, thanks to Yvonne Rainer.
Well, we are running out of time, and I want to make sure to have questions. So very quickly,
right?
We're going to I'm just going to show one quote. We don't have time to read it, but I just wanted to shout out to the fact that Martha's also a very prolific writer and a very important critic, especially around issues of photography, video, class. This is from a 3-part essay that was later published in the book called Culture Class. There's also an amazing book of her writings called Decoys and Disruptions. I really loved this idea of a ruckus. There's a quote here about how a ruckus has a place. And but just in the interest of having some time for the Q&A, we'll just keep going. We also don't have time to talk about this, although I love these pieces, and I love that you've worked in sculpture. You're such a incredibly promiscuous artist in terms of genre and medium. So, but I just want to kind of, I just want to hear from you about our current moment. This is, of course, Mike Pence, who's not exactly current, but he's Trump adjacent, and we're back in Trump 2.0. And I always feel like there's such a narcissism to thinking that we're living in the very worst times.
And yet.
But yeah, I truly feel that we are living in some really awful times. So Martha, as we open it into the audience, do you have any guiding wisdom for us? You've seen a lot.
They will provide it.
You know, I mean, you've just been someone who's always so fearless about thinking about the very darkest descents that we have spiraled into, you know? And I feel like this last month has been like deeper and darker than I ever could have feared. And
So in the 2000s, under the worst president we ever had until that moment, until this moment, George Bush, I was part of a group called Artists Against the War, in which we engaged in many, many, many different activist engagements. I discovered all of them were better artists at this than I was, and I feel proud and honored to have been able to work with them. They had great ideas for leafleting, for hanging banners in the Hart office building, for putting stickers here and there, for showing up en masse, for making a giant blanket of lies that we exhibited in many places. But here's what I believe and which I think is borne out by history. It's feet in the streets that make regimes change. It's really important to get out there. Now, I am mobility challenged. I attended the 2018 Women's March in a wheelchair, but I did demonstrate with Jewish Voice for Peace, which is not a group I love, but each time they had a demonstration about the war in Gaza, I joined if it was in New York, no matter the weather and also the position, the place. But if you can't do it, do those 5 phone calls, call your representatives, do things that are visible or which you think will have an effect. It turns out that Schumer changed his whole stance once people started flooding his phone in Washington. But I think I was disheartened by people's response to the call for 50 marches in 50 states. But it turns out that although many people I knew were going, wait, this could be a trap, lots of people in lots of places, including, very importantly, high school students, went out there and demonstrated and are still demonstrated in downtown LA, in strange places and so on. I am concerned that people have lapsed from a recognition of how hard it is to march for change, because you have to keep marching, you have to keep showing up, you have to keep making noise, and it's crucial. The main thing to do is find a group who you think you can work with, even if it's remotely, and try and stick with the agenda. And now let's talk. I'm talking too much.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Oh, not what I had in mind. More.
There's mics.
This is intimidating, but okay. Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. It was really enriching in so many ways. I was wondering about your postcard pieces that you briefly mentioned about women's working conditions in private households. I've always wondered, how did you determine which households to send these postcards to, and what were the reactions that you received? Did you document in them in any way? And how can we imagine the afterlife of these postcards?
So this gives me the opportunity to talk about the postcard network. My first postcard exchange was with Ray Johnson, and then my friend and mentor, Ellie Anton, in San Diego did a wonderful series called 100 Boots, which was a postcard photographic series of Army boots in various locales. And I said, hey, Ellie, what if I do a postcard piece? She said, sure, why not? I mean, we were living in San Diego. You have no idea what that was like. It was like, so we're talking about 1970. San Diego was 1948. It was like racist, segregated, right-wing Republican, dangerous to leftists, and incredibly active against the war. It was full of Army bases. Actually, my aunt was a WAC in San Diego during World War II, and Fort Pendleton. So there was a huge amount of activism, both on local issues and so on. So I thought, okay, postcard, but there won't be any pictures. So I wrote a budding gourmet about a middle-class woman who is thinking about cooking because her husband is a rising elevator executive, and she is there to impress because that's her job. And she cooks feijoada and other elegant things. And she complains about people whose children were raised in a stable and about people who drink Coca-Cola with Chinese food. Anyway, so she's a snob, but she's a nice person. She means well. The middle one was a worker at what I called McTowers, which was McDonald's, which was just starting to be a national chain at the time. And she starts out as an unwrapper. In other words, it's about the assembly line of making the burgers, but she's a vegetarian and she thinks about the cows and she thinks about her fellow workers. And then at the end, she organizes them. Oh, and she puts drugs in the food because it makes customers happy, but the other cooks are upset. They are going to make a revolution from a hamburger stand. They found out who owned it and what corporations. And the third one is called Tijuana Maid, and it was based on a book I found in the supermarket called Tijuana Maid, How to Talk to Your Maid Without Knowing Any Spanish. A real book. And that was like, oh yeah, that is the way it is. And you know, and of course it was in Spanish, and it was, but I wrote it in English. I do know some Spanish, basically no. Have you ever been to a supermarket? Do you know how to operate a washing machine? Can you cook a Mexican meal for us sometime? But it was also about precarity and withheld wages and women being sexually attacked, all based on the truth. So,
Martha, you are a living legend, and we are very grateful that you took the time. I think that's it.